morning, Gamecock fans. JC Shurburtt here with coffee. Today is Wednesday, May 28th, the year of our Lord 2025. Certainly happy that all of you decided to join me this fine morning to talk about Gamecock sports, Gamecock football. In particular, we do it each and every weekday, Monday through Friday, with some exceptions here and there, but certainly lots of people listening out there. Certainly appreciate that. And I've said the word certainly about 27 times in the first 51 seconds I've been on with you. So certainly don't want to continue to repeat myself over and over with that. Thank you. That's the bottom line with all of that. It's Wednesday. That means Chief Sports has expanded programming on the morning show with JB coming up at 10 a.m. Have a good guest list for you. You got Hale McGranahan from thebigspur.com. Hell yeah. He's going to preview the big official visit weekend this weekend in Columbia for the Gamecocks. Also have Rob Williams, who is the co-host of SEC Sunday Night, which will be a new show that launches this Sunday night on the Chief Sports Network. You can stream it live, just like you do our other live streaming shows. It'll be on the app. They have a podcast version. Rob Williams and Craig McMichael are your two hosts there. What's good about that is once we get into the football season, Matt and Alex Jones will crank back up Rooster Rant on Sunday nights. It's kind of a Gamecock-focused aftermath show. And so we'll have that. And also SEC Sunday night. So you have two shows on Sunday to enjoy and consume. I know that I always liked, back when I wasn't even doing this, the Sunday night shows, because, you wait till Monday to kind of get the reaction off your normal shows you listen to, but sometimes you want a little taste on Sunday. SiriusXM does a really good job on Sundays as well. Mike Morgan's filled in on those shows. Tom Luganbill, a friend of JC and Morgan, obviously does some things there. Chris Childers, that group does a fantastic job of getting that initial reaction out there, and we like that kind of stuff, and so we're going to do it here at Chief. But excited about that happening. You can go follow them on X. It's SEC Sunday Night. They'll keep you updated there. Also, Chief Sports Net on X. All of our channels. Want to say also, our websites are live now, the .coms, if you will. ChiefSportsNetwork.com has daily schedules, episodes of coffee. There's some pop culture stuff, just kind of a grab bag on ChiefSportsNetwork.com. And then CollegeFootballForever.com from Chief is kind of the home of JC and Morgan, and the SEC Sunday Night will live there. And also some general college football blog type stuff that you may want to check out. That's CollegeFootballForever.com. One more thing on SEC Sunday Night, it will stream on both YouTube channels, Chief Sports South Carolina, also College Football Forever Chief. We're going to double up with those with SEC and with JC and Morgan as we get more and more programming. Eventually, the college football channel will stand on its own, but always want to make sure you folks can get to things, and so it's easier just to do both. So there we go. With all that. So little house cleaning at the beginning. Since we started coffee in the spring sports season, we've always had kind of a review because there's games, there's basketball, two basketball teams going on, softball and baseball, other stuff. But now that we're kind of into the other months, it'll just kind of be announcements and then roll. So if the episodes get a little shorter, bear with me. There's not 15 minutes worth of a game to go over, anything like that. SEC meetings are still going on too down in Destin, and lots of stuff bubbling up from there. Brad Crawford on the morning show today will probably have all that covered, and we'll continue to talk about them inside the Gamecocks. The show it's kind of all we talked about yesterday's playoffs and things like that. A lot of good ideas out there. A lot of bad ideas out there. Kirby Smart yesterday talking about the transfer portal. I don't know. I find myself agreeing with Kirby and Lane Kiffin an awful lot these days. But Kirby mentioned the transfer portal window, maybe moving to January. And here's the problem, and this is probably the problem with a lot of this is the academic calendar, which kind of governs enrollment and classes and things like that, does not line up with football hardly at all. Other sports, it kind of lines up. You have basketball as a spring, ends in spring. So you're not going to your new spot until the summer. Baseball obviously ends in the summer, so you just start right up. But football's different. Football kind of goes over 2 semesters, really, but not. So what Kirby Smart wants to do is have one portal window in January, preferably after everybody keeps playing. Well, here's the problem with that is that, and I agree with him. Like I said, that you don't really need to have a transfer portal window open in season. It it's tough for especially for teams that are continuing to play. Although it's been well documented that if you are still playing and your season ends, then those kids get another portal window. They get 10 days or so after the completion of their season. You do have situations like Bo Pribula, who is going to be the quarterback at Missouri this year, most likely, who left Penn State before the playoff. And I understand that in a certain way for a quarterback, but I also know this. I mean, I guess because Missouri missed old Miller Moss, he was kind of next up and they took him. And I think Miller Moss is going to be really good at Louisville under Jeff Brom, but I also think Bo Pribula is a pretty good quarterback. I think he'll be good at Missouri this year. So, why was there a need to rush? I mean, you probably could have ended up where you ended up anyway, and you didn't have to leave your team. But he made a big deal out of it, and everybody's like, "Oh, this is so unfair." So I don't know. That's one of the main things, and you do have guys dropping off and getting in the portal and leaving or whatever. But the problem is going to be that if you make everybody wait until January 20th or whenever they have the championship game, enrollment's over. I mean, you're going to have a ton of like special admissions and things like that. And sometimes colleges, if colleges care about football, they make exceptions and make it work, but not all places. Even if they care about football, not all admissions departments and academic parts of the institution allow that. I mean, that's a big chunk of class you're missing going in, and I don't know if there's a lot of online or I don't know how you would accommodate that. If you can, like I said, I agree. There needs to be some kind of uniform period, and then that's it. But and also keep in mind this too: the transfer portal and the agents know this. Unfortunately, it does not keep players from transferring out and going to another school. What it does is it keeps other schools from contacting them. There was nothing. There was a lawsuit. Wisconsin tried to keep this kid who's from Miami, who's going to Miami. I don't know if you ever want to keep somebody from going home. That's just me. But they tried to keep him there because he had signed an NIL deal, and he just left. And the NCAA was like, well, there's no rule against what he's doing, which is leaving and going to another place. You guys figured that out. So you can't really keep the players there anyway, technically. But it's a little risky to get in the portal and then no contact. And so you don't know, I guess you could work it out with intermediaries or something like you do NIL. But that's interesting, that little loophole there. And as we know in college football, they find loopholes. But what I think should happen is this, folks. I think that how you could make this make sense and have a January portal window, and then that way players, unfortunately, I don't know that it's necessarily right to have a guy get in the portal in the January window, but he started classes so he goes to school for free on your dime for 6 months and then leaves. That's to me, I don't know about that, but what I think should happen is if they want to go with something like that, from a football standpoint, because that's what coaches are wanting. I mean, they just look at it kind of through that prism. Then they need to move spring practice to summer. June's already becoming a pretty crowded month with official visits and all that good stuff, but you could make it work. And then they have kind of more like OTAs that like they do in the NFL. Instead of a spring practice, you just have a summer practice and you go out there for 2 weeks and work on football. And of course, it's hot, but it's going to be hot in August when you start again, and that's just about anywhere in the South. But when you're northern schools, you're more Midwestern and Northeastern schools, they'd probably like having spring practice a little bit later when the warmer weather gets here because it's just nicer. You can go outside more in some of the places around our country. So I I'm in favor of pushing that to summer so you have an opportunity before fall camp to work with who's ultimately going to be on your team. And that's the problem. You don't There's guys coming and going, and it's hard to coach and put together a team that way. And I understand that. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out. SEC meetings aren't going to decide transfer portal stuff. That's NCAA level. Um, Although the SEC and Big Ten, I think, are just deciding to make their own rules, right? But what is going to be decided is playoff and 9-game schedule. Shane Beamer yesterday, in an article by John Talty from CBS Sports, says he's in favor of 9 games, but it needs to be fair because South Carolina plays Clemson, Georgia plays Georgia Tech, Florida plays Florida State, Kentucky plays Louisville. I'll continue to just say that I don't think anybody should do Kentucky any favors scheduling wise. They're the only school in the SEC, the only one. When everybody else, including Vanderbilt, is going out there and scheduling up, right? Vanderbilt plays some road games at some what I call landmine schools. I mean, they played at Georgia State last year and lost, Never schedule that. Don't schedule at Georgia State. They got Stanford on their schedule. I know Stanford's not that good right now. They got Virginia Tech. I mean, Vandy scheduled up. Missouri scheduled up. Everybody, Ole Miss is scheduled up. They've all scheduled up, right? Ole Miss, when they scheduled Wake Forest, and Wake, of course, backed out. That's athletic director of the year over there at Wake. But Wake Forest, I mean, why would you go to Wake Forest at the time when that was scheduled? That's tough. I mean, right at that point, they were really good, Hartman and those guys. So, everybody else, look at what's happened to Florida. I mean, Texas and Oklahoma did it anyway. Arkansas's got Notre Dame this year. A&M's got Notre Dame. I mean, when this thing was announced that they were going to expand the playoff, everybody started doing that except Kentucky. And Kentucky's formula is pretty simple. They play 2 group of 5s, usually 2 MAC teams or a MAC and like Southern Miss was on the schedule last year. They always play an FCS team. A lot of times it's in state, Eastern Kentucky, Murray State, somebody like that. And then they play Louisville, which is a good football team now, but obviously Louisville had gone through some tough times. That's not the same as playing Florida State, when they're up or even sort of up if you're Florida, or especially Clemson. Georgia Tech is coming back. Georgia caught a lot of crap for that. Well, Georgia Tech's not very good. Yeah, but they're going to be. Historically, they are. And I guess Louisville's historically good too, but man, they're not doing anything. It's the formula. I call it the Music City Bowl schedule. They know if they get to 6 or 7 wins, the Music City Bowl will gladly take them. And so Kentucky, I don't care about them. But the other 3, they have a point. They have a good point, And because Kentucky's been kind of cavalier and not going out and wanted to schedule up or anything like that, they have their formula. It works for them. They like to get the bowls. No sympathy for the Wildcats with regards to all this. But I think Georgia, Florida, and Carolina have an argument to be made, and Shane Beamer pointed that out. I mean, you start talking about the SEC Big Ten scheduling thing down the road too. I mean, what are you going to do? Nine SECs, Clemson, and then a Big Ten team. The good news for Carolina is if that happens, and who knows what South Carolina's program will be like. That's kind of the main topic today at that point. But you know how if it's a made for TV event, just like the daggum SEC ACC challenge or the Big Ten ACC challenge or the Big 12 SEC challenge of basketball, they like to match up the ratings teams with each other. So as things stand right now, who would the Gamecocks really have to add to their schedule? Would it be a team tougher than North Carolina, NC State, Miami, Virginia Tech? Probably not at this point. You're probably looking at an Illinois, most years, or even Northwestern, or Indiana, or Purdue, or Maryland. Uh, my preference, UCLA. UCLA or Washington. Now, Washington gets a little tough some years, but I think UCLA in the Rose Bowl would be cool. I'd sign up for a road trip out there. Although I've seen Tennessee go out there and get beat in an opener. I saw Texas A&M, a good Texas A&M team, blow a 30-point lead in an opener at UCLA. And then last year I saw, or no, not recently, not last year, Ed Orgeron and LSU. Remember when he made the comment about the blue? We're gonna go beat that team with a sissy blue. Yeah, and they got beat. So I don't know. Maybe UCLA isn't the best team to schedule, but the Rose Bowl certainly is a bucket list stadium, and hopefully the Gamecocks play there in the real deal. Although I don't even know if that's possible because yeah, it is. It's possible. It is possible with the playoffs. They're just taking the Big Ten because there's no more Pac-12. Anywho, so that's 11 games that you could lose if you're South Carolina because it hangs in the balance, and that's tough. Um, but if you do this, and then you have auto bids, which accomplish a lot, and people are thinking, well, why don't you just take the 16 best teams? Well, uh, I don't trust the committee to pick the best 16 best teams without some sort of guidance. I mean, they really didn't. All right, so the history of this committee, and it's the same organization that ran the BCS that sat there and lied to everybody with a smile on their face. We have no interest in moving off of our model. And then when they get to four, we have no interest in expanding. When all the time you got reports and everything else that they're expanding, it's ridiculous. It's a candy assed type organization, right? I got a whole lot, like the folks that run bowl season, like they're the bowl game people that are apart from the playoff. I like those folks a lot better. They're very realistic. They're like, hey, we know this, but we still think this is important. Blah blah blah. Although bowls are, fading slowly. I don't think they're going anywhere, but really they're fading a little bit. But I got more. The playoff people, and then the people they put on it, and they have athletic directors, and Greg Sankey had the quote of the day yesterday or 2 days ago. I pulled it, and it said, "What we have right now is a political process being used to find football answers." And I don't know if that's word for word. He said, "What we need is football information determining football answers." I think that's smart, dude. I mean, what have I been saying? I mean, now how is that political? Well, there are political elements to it. You have committees who are appointed, committee members appointed. You have an attempt at some balanced representation, former coaches, former players. You have a media member or two. Golly, they don't they don't do a good job picking that person. Um, you have athletic directors though. I mean, it's one of those things where it is. They're trying to be a little democratic about it. That's kind of the way college football has been run to a certain extent. uh, like a big messy democracy, and I love democracy. I love, but that's politics. That's how you can kind of run a country, and how you make the sausage in our country to run the government. Picking a field is not like that, and it may, it's more similar to having like a gigantic, eclectic judge panel like you do in sports like gymnastics and diving and things like that, where you got to be pretty. It's like a big beauty contest. And different committees emphasize different things. We see it in basketball all the time. But basketball's picking 68 teams, and they always screw up something. But for the most part, we're arguing about teams that get left out, and 24 win SEC teams that get left out, where two or three of the schools that you beat during the season get in over you because of metrics. We remember that, don't we? Uh, but it's not, they're not sitting there with such a limited bunch of spots. Like, if anything, they're knocking a team like Indiana last year, down uh, a few seed lines because of schedule. I mean, they do emphasize strength of schedule. Now, there's less games in football, we know. But when Ward Manuel says these teams play the schedule that they play, and you look and you see, well, outside of the league champion from the SEC, the other two teams that got in had the easiest path, period. Texas and Tennessee. And, they got in, did okay. Texas did okay. They won a game. Indiana, Penn State. Penn State got all the way to the semis, and they're my preseason number one now because of who they got back and who they hired at D coordinator. And I'm not a Penn State hater, but that was kind of fool's gold. I mean, they had to play SMU and Boise State. They gave Notre Dame a run for their money. Probably should have won the football game, but lost in a classic. But they finished what, 11-1, or 11-2 because they lost the Big Ten championship game pretty decisively. The score was misleading to Oregon, but they didn't play anybody. They play very few teams with a winning record, folks. And so but they decided otherwise. So if you have auto bids, you take that out of their hands, and the conferences decide on that level who gets in, while still having, with a 16 team field, the flexibility to where if there's a year you have 5 or 6 and they're part of the best one, then go for it. I would rather much put that in the hands of the committee, like who's the 5th or 6th team from the conference that gets in, than what happened last year. I just don't have any faith in that. It also, I think, when you have auto bids, you'll have play-in games. I like that concept because in a 16 team league and with the transfer portal and the roster upheaval every year, you can't sit there and forecast it out. And I mentioned this yesterday. You can't sit there and go, well, these are these teams should be good. And these teams, for the last 10 years, they've done this. And because you just don't know year to year. I mentioned before, Mississippi State is going to be picked last. I guarantee you, in the league, we got 60 new players. A team could be top 3 in the league. It could be worse than last year. It's impossible to be fair with it. And contrary to popular belief, people in Birmingham aren't sitting there trying to screw other teams. Let's screw South Carolina with this. It seems like that sometimes, and it seems like that in a lot of schools. But they really try to do their best. I think what they ran into with like a Texas versus Oklahoma schedule this past year is just, and this is one thing I don't like about what they do. Or because they did this in 2012 too, and it cost Carolina because you lined up Georgia, LSU, Florida back to back to back, and it just wasn't fair. Whereas then Georgia had in 2012 a glide path after they played Carolina and got rocked in Columbia. But that was the year that Missouri and A&M came into the league, and they just kind of they kind of stuck it all together. And what they did this year was basically stick it all together. I mean, South Carolina played one league team from the Eastern time zone, and that was Kentucky. They basically just looked at it and said, well, who hadn't played in a while and where, and let's play those games. And then we're going to protect all of the secondary rivalries like Auburn, Georgia. Texas is going to play A&M and M and Arkansas, that kind of thing. And you ended up with a pretty unbalanced schedule um, for some reason. And that's just kind of how it worked out. You go to a 3-6 model, there's going to be some teams by virtue of those permanent opponents that are going to honestly, I mean, the 6 is going to matter the most, but they're honestly, I mean, like if I'm Texas, you're like you got to play Oklahoma, Arkansas, and A&M every year. Those are your buddies. Well, that's Arkansas eventually will have a better football team. They love beating Texas. A&M will beat them again. Oklahoma will beat them again. So you got 3 rivalries baked in. I guess you're going back to Southwest Conference days for them a little bit, plus the 6 that rotate on. But if you get to 9, I think you can get to a top 6 relatively fairly. And I don't know that last year would not have been fair. The teams that were kind of in the mix for the playoff, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Alabama, they would have played it off. I mean, Carolina would have played Tennessee, Alabama would have played Ole Miss, and whoever got the bid got the bid. And I like that. I like settling it on the field. It's exciting. And then if you're even the third team and you get beat, like if you were Tennessee last year and Carolina beats you, you got a 16 team field. And if Notre Dame's not making it, there's 3 at large. If Notre Dame is making it, there's 2. You're 10-3. You still got a shot at getting into that final slot there. So anyway, those are just a few of the things going on. I think it'll be interesting to see where we're going. And where we're going right now is going to look at the South Carolina football program, because we can talk about this all we want, but if South Carolina is at winning 5 to 7 games a year, they're really not going to you're really going to kind of be more of a bowl team or a non-postseason team, which stinks when that happens. But you look at Shane Beamer, okay, and you look at this program and where it's at, and I think that taking the big moments out of it, the being in the playoff hunt last year, and all that stuff, take everything out of it as far as the specific things that if you make the case for this coaching staff and for this program being headed in the right direction, and that all matters, and that's part of I guess the conversation. But how close are they? They've had some moments. You look at the record, 9-4. That happened in 2017. That 9-4 was nothing like this 9-4, because this 9-4 included the wins over Clemson and top 10 A&M and a lot of big ones, right? And 17 was a fun year. Don't get me wrong, but Clemson game didn't turn out well. They were beneficiaries of, some teams that maybe weren't as good as you thought. Still a good year. It was Muschamp's second season, and he got him 9 wins. But it was an 8-win regular season, 8-4. But you look at that, and it's like, well, that's not. They're still not back to double-digit wins. They still didn't finish in the top 10, 15, or whatever. Didn't make the playoff, and there's a lot of meat left on the bone. Don't get me wrong. But in college football, you sort of look through, it's hard to ascend in college football. I mean, Ole Miss is the latest example of a team under Lane Kiffin that's trying to ascend. They got the portal talent. They got NFL dudes on their field. They got better roster than they've had because of what they do with the portal. Still, 9-3 last year. Got ambushed in Baton Rouge. I mean, you lose in Baton Rouge, you lose in the swamp. That's tough. Lose to that Kentucky team at home was inexcusable, but upsets happen, as South Carolina found out against Illinois. But 10-3 hasn't had the breakthrough to the playoff like you think. It's hard. They've not been to Atlanta to play for the SEC championship game ever. It's hard. And Kiffin's been there since 2020. you know, uh, so you look at it that way. I mean, Tennessee, as good as Heupel's been, they finally did make the playoff this past year. We saw what happened. But that team with Joe Milton, I mean, not Joe Milton, with Hendon Hooker that Carolina beat a couple of years ago, that was a better football team, in my opinion. This past year's team is probably better on defense, but I think overall I would take that team that could explode like Jokey Smurf in your face, more than maybe the grinded out team this year. Though I do respect them for winning that way. It takes time. I mean, Tennessee was kind of in the wilderness for a while, but I don't know. They've had trouble getting past Georgia, and it's usually that. It's usually like one team, two teams you can't get past. So you look through college football. There's two teams really that have ascended. One still doesn't have a national championship, and that's Oregon and Clemson. And Clemson had the '81 title in their back pocket. Back in '81, Oregon was bad. So I hate to even mention Clemson, but Clemson, was kind of stuck in the mud a little bit under Tommy Bowden. And then with Dabo Swinney, it took him, they had to have multiple years where they were happy going to a major bowl and winning the ACC, or not winning the ACC because Florida State did, just having a good season. And then Deshaun Watson comes in, and in 2015, magical year, won their games, got to the BCS national or the college football playoff finals. Got a good draw in Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl, and then played Alabama for the title. And then the next year they came back and won it. So you got to, I don't want to say crawl before you come on, but you got to get close. You got to get in position. There are very few stories like TCU a couple of years ago where they just kind of come out of nowhere. They win the Big 12, or actually they didn't win the Big 12, did they? They got in the playoff and, upset Michigan. They pulled an upset and then just got slaughtered. But there's very few times like that, and especially with a 12-team or 16-team playoff now. I mean, you can't just pull one upset and away you go. So, you got to kind of knock on the door before you can kick it in. So where's Carolina? Where's Carolina? And it's probably one where it's closer than you think. Carolina really has not had very many years where you go, they were close. Some would say had the 1980 Georgia game gone differently with George Rogers. I mean, that team finished 8-4, but I lost to Clemson in an upset. That's, I think, one of the only times Carolina's lost to Clemson as a ranked team. That was kind of the first year they were in the hunt. Of course, back then the polls and bowls determined everything. We've all heard of '84, a loss to Navy late. 10-1 regular season still has not been topped at this school, and they lost the bowl, finished 10-2, lost the Gator Bowl, should have been in the major bowl, but that loss to Navy, it was just that team will always be talked about as the team that could have had a trophy, right? Could have had a trophy standing, national championship trophy sitting there. 2013 was another year, and this was a year where I don't know really. Carolina was a good football, really impressive at the end football team. When you kind of look at the total picture, they beat North Carolina in the opener. North Carolina ended up I believe, being a bowl team that year. I'd have to double check. They won a road game at UCF, and that was when they had Blake Bortles. That's the only game UCF lost all year. UCF ended up winning the Fiesta Bowl, and having a really good year under George O'Leary. They beat Clemson. Clemson won the Orange Bowl. Did really well there. I think did Clemson win the ACC that year? No, Florida State did, because Florida State won the whole thing. And, they beat Missouri on the road. Missouri was a top five team. That team, the problem was that they lost that game in Tennessee, and that was similar to the Navy loss. I don't think we knew it at the time because Carolina had dropped a game at Georgia earlier that year in Athens, 41-30. And, I don't know that anybody sat there and thought, well, this is going to cost Chad a national title. But what happened later was crazy. First, the kick six happened, and Auburn ends up going to the Georgia Dome to play Missouri. I like how Carolina matched up with that Auburn team that year. Um, and then Auburn beats Missouri, and then Michigan State upsets Ohio State, and chaos happens. And lo and behold, Auburn goes to the Rose Bowl to play Florida State for all the titles. So Carolina could have been in that position had they just beaten a very mediocre to bad Tennessee team led by champions of life in Knoxville. So that was costly. In 2022, and this is something, it's hard to say, because I look at the bowl record, if you kind of look at the regular season record, there hasn't been a ton of 8-win regular seasons, 9-win regular seasons around here. Carolina's gotten to 9 and 8 and 10 and 11, but primarily, because they won the bowl game, which counts. They absolutely count on your record. I'm not dismissing that, but we're trying to determine progress, and we know bowl games are a crapshoot, and now there's opt-outs and all that good stuff. But Beamer won 8 in 2022, and we know about the big wins at the end. But here's the thing: South Carolina that year, and I think there's some reasons why. I think you can kind of point to what the plan was in some of these games on offense, and that's all I got to say about that. As to sort of why things didn't go as well. And the losses were not close. I mean, Arkansas was 41-30, but Carolina scored some garbage touchdowns late. I don't know why they didn't they threw it to Juice Wells a bunch that game, and the next week they didn't. It was weird. Maybe a little better game plan on offense helps. I don't know. In that one, Georgia smacked them up pretty good. And then you had the Missouri loss, and then that was inexcusable. And then you had the Florida debacle in the swamp. And all those were double-digit losses, bad losses. So JC, how can a team that's like that be close? Well, because at the end of the day, Carolina didn't play up to its potential, especially on offense in a lot of those games. And three of those teams that beat Carolina, Missouri, Arkansas, Florida, all finished 6-6. So in hindsight, I don't know. Should you have won those games? Arkansas at the time was rolling. That's the one I kind of questioned, but absolutely that team should have been better against Florida and Missouri that year. So let's say they had beat Arkansas and had won 3 games against 6-6 teams, they are in the playoff in the 4-team format. Now, probably they would have played Georgia again, but that was, and that's in Shane Beamer's second year. That's the second year of a coach that took over a program that had lost 18 of 27 games. And I know 2020's record is really ugly at 2-8, but that's all SEC schedule. That was more like a 4-8, 5-7 team at the end of the day. If they'd had some wins, some cupcakes. So I thought that was, by the time it all was said and done, Spencer Rattler and this group, they had they taken care of business against some teams that they ended up being better at, they would have been in the hunt. And then last year, of course, 3 losses, and 2 of them were by a combined 5 points to Alabama and LSU. And you'd have been in the play, not only in the playoff, just won one of those games, but you'd also been in the SEC championship game. And I think my theory is, given this, that his first 4 years at South Carolina, because 2021 had no business even being in a bowl, and they got up off the mat and kept fighting and won the bowl game. But I think this is a start to Shane Beamer's career at Carolina. that you have to say definitely it's ahead of schedule. Now you do have the transfer portal, and you can get ahead of schedule if you know what you're doing. But also, it's put the program overall in position to get in and kick down the door, and that takes time. It may not happen this coming year, but you look at last season specifically, and you're like, gosh, they were really, really close. And I don't think that if you have aspirations to be a winning football program, the mindset can be, oh, they blew it. I think the mindset's got to be, well, that's progress, build on that, and keep moving forward. Progress isn't always linear. However, I think Carolina can make some noise this year too, specifically because you have 16 and 7 on the other side, or 6, 16 to 6. Did I say 7? Thinking of Clowney. And I think that once you go through this a few times, and once you start having seasons that, it's kind of the norm that you're in the hunt, maybe you don't quite get there, but you keep building and eventually it bounces your way. And I think a lot of that has to do with recruiting. I think you got to continue to bring good players in. You got to replace good with good. You have to upgrade. Carolina's been very fortunate at quarterback with Spencer Rattler and then Lenore Sellers. And that's a big part of the battle, good defensive players and all that. But I think that when you look at it and you examine kind of what went down in 2 of Shane Beamer's 4 seasons that included big wins at home over good teams, then this program's closer than maybe people think to breaking through. And uh, seasons like last year, where you came up a little short, they're important because it shows you can get there. You may not get to grab the mic, but you're on the stage. All right, I got to get out of here. It's JC Shurburtt Coffee. Be sure to join us later today inside the Gamecocks show. We'll have the late night Gamecock Matt Anderson on, and then the late night Gamecock show tonight on Chief. And we'll holla at you soon.